But part of the gender role of woman is implicitly the ability to bear children.
So someone can't. You have to apply the reductio ad absurdum, of course. Someone is born without the capacity. A female is born without the capacity to have children.
Yeah, that's an outlier.
But she's still a woman, right?
Well, they don't necessarily think of themselves as real women.
Take, for example, the video you did with me. You stated you were very, very authoritative in the things that you said throughout, but you again and again and again just got things dead wrong.
I'm happy to accept your criticism on that.
So that's just one video.
The thing I was talking about was months old, and it's difficult to see the social media effect of something months after it's happened.
Sure.
So my mistake. I completely.
But also, like the Olympics position on transgender athletes.
I looked this up. I thought it was acceptable. But the thing is, I still think that is actually an extreme position, because it is. I think it's an extreme thing to say that someone who is born biologically male can ever be allowed, no matter what the conditions, to compete in competitions that are designed for people who are biologically female. I think that's a very extreme position.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I think
to complain about like testosterone levels and things like that. Joe Rogan laid all this out with Adam Ruins Everything.
Yeah, well, to be fair, Adam was a nut himself.
Yeah, he is a nut, yeah. But again, another famous left-wing nut. How do they keep turning up?
Yeah, but you could do this with the right all day long.
But Joe Rogan's right when it's not just about testosterone levels. There are other inherent characteristics.
Oh, there's massive, yeah. If you have testosterone levels during puberty, you become wider, you become stronger.
Your bones become denser, your muscles. Yeah, I agree.
They can't go away. And so when you come off it, well, you've got advantages which you wouldn't have.
Exactly. So I think it is an extreme position for the Olympics to allow any transgender athletes to compete in. There should be a separate category.
But the thing is I think it's because you're looking at it as an outsider that's not a sports scientist. And let me explain why, because it was something that I did myself. Take, for example, running. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things to specifically long distance running is hemoglobin in the blood. Mm-hmm. If you have a stocky size, it's actually not very helpful.
Yeah, I'm aware.
It's not great.
I know. I've never.
And it's a really interesting case. Like we do our, we make it so that our marathons, our longest races are a certain amount.
Yeah.
If you double it, all of a sudden the world champions tend to be female.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. It kind of is a case that these are structured around men rather than, or the average male body rather than the average female. So what happens is if you get a biological male, is a woman, trans woman, and they take the necessary hormone therapy, their hemoglobin levels go down dramatically to the point where they are in line. It's debatable. There's some studies recently have shown actually it's not quite, which means I have to.
But we'll take that broad.
It brings it down to this level where that's the property that matters for this one sport. So for me, I mean, personally, I don't give a shit what people identify as. It's irrelevant to sport. It shouldn't be about what you identify as at all. It should just be whether or not you meet certain quotas. And maybe we have arguments to change quotas according to the things that make those important. If you're in America, just one more example, and you're over 7 foot, there's something like an 80% chance that you're a professional NBA player.
Yeah.
That's how important height is.
It's also how rare 7 foot tall people are.
Very, very rare. Yeah, that's true.
But the problem I have with this is that that may be true for outlier examples, like the world's longest races and things like that. But the average women's sport, like if you took cycling, tennis, weightlifting, basketball, rugby, well, not rugby, well, no, there probably is women's rugby. Football, like women's football teams, professional football teams get beaten by teenage boys, teams of teenage boys. It's the physical distinction is so great between men and women. I think it is, frankly, irresponsible to try and mesh any of it together, because it's just men keep winning women's sports, and in fact it's failed male athletes who transition and then become female champions.
I agree
and that's totally unfair to the women who will never have that opportunity and yet want to be sports people. There has to be a biologically female category in order for women to win anything, just because of the natural state of human beings. And so I think it is radical to allow men who are claiming to be women, and
So when you say men claiming to be women, does that mean that you don't
Well, who
accept
identify?
trans women? Like, would you say trans women are women, for example? Because that's an
No,
interesting...
I don't think so. I think that fundamental to a woman is.
Because they're not saying they're female. They're saying they're
I
a
agree.
woman.
I agree. That's the thing. But part of the gender role of woman is implicitly the ability to bear children.
So someone can't... You have to apply the reductio ad absurdum, of course. You know, someone is born without the capacity... A female is born without the capacity to have children.
Yeah, that's an outlier.
But she's still a woman, right?
Well, they don't necessarily think of themselves as real women.
Yeah, but they are. Like
hang on.
what does that matter?
Well, it does matter, because the whole point of the gender roles is to facilitate reproduction.
No, actually, it's not,
Of course
because...
it is.
Well, it's a large aspect. Like, why do you think homosexuals exist?
Because they feel attracted to the opposite sex.
No, but why do you think they exist naturally?
I don't know.
Do you have no idea, like, why
Well,
they exist?
I would imagine that it's because biological reproduction and biology generally is not an exact science. So you always have a sort of mean distribution with outliers.
So that would be a massive... 10% of the population is homosexual, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a massive outlier which isn't seen in nature unless it's intended. In a sense, by intention, of course, I mean the evolution is selected for it.
Sure.
And you
Why
find...
would evolution select for homosexuality?
There's many good reasons for it. And if you look at the animal kingdom, it's prolific. You have a lot of gay sex
in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, so this is a sign of it being natural.
Well, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Just because something's natural doesn't mean that it's good. But I'm not against homosexuality, obviously.
No, I know
but
that.
also, I think that there's a danger of interpreting what we would consider homosexuality with intent, and merely an animal's biological desire to reproduce. So, for example, like, we've got two male dogs, and one shags the other, but that doesn't mean he's gay. That just means he really wants to shag, and he's not that picky.
Yeah, well,
it's another dog.
You've basically got a bi dog.
No, I don't think you can call him bi. I think you can
So if
call
a man
him...
fucks another man, would you say he's bi?
But you're conflating the rational capacity of the man and the dog. The dog is just following a biological imperative to reproduce, and there is another dog there. I think that if I were to give him a choice between a male and female dog, he'd probably go for the female dog.
You see, I think this is a relatively dense way to think of it, because have you had the opportunity to read Richard Dawkins' Selfish Gene?
I actually haven't, no.
It's a really good book, and basically the premise on it, which has been supported by an enormous amount of evidence, is that it's not about the individual succeeding, it's about the genes succeeding.
Sure.
So when you have bees, most bees don't reproduce themselves, they help the colony. They are still evolutionarily massively successful. Why? Because they help the genes preserve into the next generation. Gays, homosexuals, are basically the honeybee of humanity.
I'm sure they do, but I think this is rather divorced from the original point that reproduction is the central focus and capacity of being a woman. That's the point of being a woman.
I think female.
Yeah, but woman is an extension of the biological role of female, because we're a social species.
It's definitely linked, but I don't think it's entirely done so. For example, and definitions change as we discover things.
They do, but the definitions we use for man and woman, the left is right to distinguish them from the biological sex of being male or female, right? They are not the same thing. They are gender roles. They are social roles. So they come with a bunch of prescriptions and proscriptions, and there is a general understanding of what a woman does and a general understanding of what a man does in broad terms. And the reason that we have these is to facilitate mating between men and women. Because we are an intelligent social species, we need to know what the other person... We need to know something about them before we've even spoken to the person. How do you know how to deal with women rather than men?
Well,
right?
you do. You look at someone and you're either sexually attracted or you're not. Basically, this is why
Yeah, but
Tinder has such success.
But Tinder doesn't have success in building relationships and fostering families.
I've been with my partner 6 years. I know it's an anecdotal version. I know.
But you're definitely going to be the outlier.
I'm really not, though. Plenty of people have a lot of success through it.
I really don't think the data just isn't on your side here.
What data do you have of not being?
Marriage rates, birth rates.
But marriage rates in general are down. You can't attribute that to people.
I'm not saying it's because of Tinder, but Tinder is certainly not helping, is it? I think hookup culture is deeply destructive to family life, and I think that it renders people effectively in the same way that pornography is destructive to this sort of thing. And again, getting back to the gender role of male and women, man and woman. there is an assumption that women bear children. That's wrapped up in the gender role. So you're saying, well, if a woman can't have children, is she still a woman? Well, if you ask a woman who can't have children, she'll say, I feel like less of a woman. Yes, there is an assumption that women should be able to give birth to children.
Okay, so if they say I feel like less of a woman, she's still a woman. She's not a man, or she's not like neither.
She will still be able to fulfill the role of woman up until the point where the role of woman involves having a child. And that's the teleology of the role of woman.
But as a social species, like there's loads of evidence to show that women used to nurse other people's babies. People would look after each other even if they didn't have babies themselves. We're very social in this situation. That's fulfilling and facilitating the very purpose of a social species. You don't need to reproduce yourself. This is just
that's
not true. It's not the case.
But that doesn't withdraw the part of the gender role that is the biological imperative to have children.
But she still fulfills the role. It's just she can't participate in one part of it. You're still a man if you don't give birth to the child. A father is the person who brings that child up. That's the person who gets the respect, the love, the dignity. That's the person who is the father.
These are all aspects of the gender role that is man, and there are aspects of the gender role that is woman. But one core part, and the part that I think that most people are looking for when they form relationships, is the ability to produce children. And the same, like if a man goes into a relationship with a woman after having already had a vasectomy and doesn't tell her, then I think there is a fundamental lack. That is effectively a lie by omission. Because I think most women go into long-term relationships with the intent of getting married and having children. And if you can get married but can't have children and you never tell her that, then I think that there's an ethical failing on your part.
No, I completely agree with you, but you're kind of implying that trans women just wouldn't say, "Hey, I can't have kids because I'm not a female." Like that's just,
I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, what this is establishing is that these are core parts of the gender role of man and woman, is the ability to reproduce. And when you say trans women are women, like I said, there are lots of things.
Outliers, right?
Hang on, there are lots of facets to being a woman, and you've got the social performativity of it, you've got the biological imperative under it, and various other aspects that we can spend lots of time listing. And a transgender man to woman might be able to hit loads of these, right? They might say, right, I present as a woman, I'm going to adopt the female role in certain circumstances, but underlying the whole thing is the ability to reproduce, and they're never going to be able to meet that.
So you could argue that it's a primary association with the term woman. I'd say it's more female than woman.
I think so.
But the fact that you've just said, if you have a woman, a biological female, for example, that has a for whatever reason, they can't have children. Yeah. They're still a woman, dude. Like I don't know why you're so caught up on it. Like what's the problem,
because they don't think they are, to the extent that they would like to. There is they understand there is something deficient about themselves, and it grieves them.
So if you have a man and
a man who couldn't get an erection would feel like less of a man.
But erection's slightly different
or
to not
couldn't have children.
Would feel slightly less of a man. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's tentatively grant that, right? Still a man, and you're kind of a massive dick to say that he's not.
See, now that's just a moral judgment.
I know it's a moral judgment, and that's not my argument against it. I'm just saying that...
I'm not saying he can't... This is why I think it's important to not just have man and then yes or no. It is important to make that three-dimensional and break that up into certain categories. Because, a man in Western English-speaking society opens doors for women, pulls out the chair, is respectful about certain things.
Yeah.
But also can have sex with a woman and impregnate her. That's also that's also
often.
Yeah, well, that's the purpose of it, because the purpose of gender roles is to allow our species to reproduce and carry on. Otherwise, it's the end of the species. So that has to be the case. Underlying it, there has to be a biological imperative for reproduction. I agree that if that's missing, he does still fulfill the criteria of what we would call a man, and we can't exactly categorize him as anything else. But there is still the deficiency where if that were me, I would feel like less of a man, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of men would feel like less of a man, and it's the same with the women. And so I'm not
arguing against the less part.
Yeah.
But I'll let you finish.
So I'm not saying that if someone has made the effort to take hormones, go through the surgery, adopting all of the signifiers of being a woman. I'm not saying that I would be disrespectful to that person, right? I would call her a her just out of politeness, if nothing else. But the problem when you say trans women are women is that's an all-encompassing phrase. It's very flat. There's no nuance to that at all. And at the end of the day, they aren't.
Well, I think that there is nuance to it. They're not saying trans women are female. That you get people which say this, right? Okay, you go to the far extremes, you get people that say that, male, female is completely made up. That's not supported by the science.
Yes,
and it's just nonsense, right? I mean, I'm not a scientist myself, but from what I've read, and I've read a fair amount on, that is nonsense, okay?
Absolutely.
You either have large gametes or small gametes, or potential for either, okay?
There are lots of different.
That's not like, this is not like the position they're saying. They're saying that woman is, and man, they are different to how we conceive them. So the way that science works is that we make scientific discoveries, of course, and then we change our definitions. We change the way in which we see things. So, for example, we had a definition of mammal. We were saying that it's a warm-blooded, often covered with hair or fur, and it gives birth, placenta and all the rest of it. And then we go, fuck, there's the platypus. And so what we do is we go, okay, we change the definition. If you look at the definition now, it says typically this is the case, but it is still, even though it gives birth, even though it has eggs, it's still a mammal. It's just an outlier. It would be wrong not to call it a mammal.
Sure.
Well, with the scientific advancements that we've made and the discoveries that we've made, such as complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, where you can have a biological male that looks entirely like a female, let alone woman, looks like a complete female, and historically would have always fulfilled the role of a woman. Not to the reproduction, but
that's
definitely the rest.
But I think
it's not necessary, though.
I do think that is implicitly a key role of being a woman. That's what you're advertising is your sexual fertility.
You seem to be saying it is the only role for it.
No, I'm not saying it's the only role.
Because if you remove it and you're still saying that that person is a woman, they're just less kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Then you can do exactly the same for trans women. You can say, look, you're less of a woman than a woman that can give birth, but you're still a woman.
Yes.
These people, like,
I don't,
they're not asking for much.
No, I look, I'm not saying that someone who is transitioning cannot perform as a woman in the social sphere. And like I said, I'm polite, so I'm happy to use the pronouns that they're looking for in that regard. I'm not going to use ridiculous pronouns, but I'm happy to use she, her, right?
Right.
But the phrase "trans women are women" is not only it's also a linguistic framing to which I can't agree. The fact that you have to distinguish them as trans women means there is something different to them from what we would normally conventionally define women to be, which is just an adult human female.
No, well, their argument would be that you shouldn't have to differentiate them because
I do,
they're a woman. No, but it's the same as the platypus. We don't need to differentiate.
Yes,
the
we
platypus.
do.
We don't.
We
don't unless we're talking about one.
For women,
specific
we
aspect.
do because I want children.
Right.
As most men want children, presumably. And so, if you say there's no difference between a trans woman and a woman, well, that's wrong.
No, that's not what the claim is. They're not saying there's no difference. They're saying trans women are women. They're saying that they are, just as the platypus is a mammal, yet it gives birth in a different way. Trans women are women, and yet they don't have this one primary factor.
But I'm not sure that's enough, because the primary factor is what men are looking for when they're looking for a partner. And so if
it's not the sole.
Sorry,
it's not the sole factor.
No, I didn't say it's the sole factor.
I know, because it seems that you kind of need it to be the sole factor for your argument to work. If it was the sole factor,
I don't think you do have to make it the sole factor, but I think it is a component of primary importance, and in the same way as appearing to be female is of primary importance. And the trans person can appear to be female very successfully, but I mean, if I was to reach whatever age I reach, and I think, right, okay, I'm going to settle down and start a family, and I meet a lovely lady, I think, great, I'd love to start a family with this woman, and we're talking about getting married and having kids, and it turned out that she was not capable of that, for any reason, I would feel betrayed, and I think rightfully so.
Even if she didn't know? Even
Well, no, if she didn't know, then
well,
obviously.
but
the
trans people don't do this. They
yeah,
don't run around
no,
pretending that they can.
I'm not saying they do, but,
Yeah.
and so I'm not attacking or anything like that. I'm not
No, okay.
casting aspersions. But what I'm just
These
trying to.
scenarios only make sense if that's a premise that's
No,
kind
that's
of-
not true, right? But if that were to be the case, I'm just laying out the hypothetical because it shows that look,
Sure.
you would feel betrayed because there is a key component to being a woman that person cannot fulfill, and so saying trans women are women is actually kind of a platitude. They might be able to fulfill the expressive roles of what we consider a woman to be, but they can't do certain necessary biological functions underneath that. And so we can't just say trans women are women because there is actually a significant distinction there. And what they're trying to do by trans women are women is effectively flatten all this so there is no distinction. So we don't have... So it becomes transphobic to say, well, I'd like to have children someday.
Well, no, you know that. I know that these far people, and I don't agree with them.
I know.
But I want to go with your hypothetical, okay?
Yeah.
I would feel betrayed. Not because they're trans, not because they can't give birth, you know. I'd feel betrayed because they lied to me.
Yeah.
Because they held the truth from me.
Sure.
So that your issue here isn't got anything to do with whether or not they can conceive. It's to do with whether or not there's someone that will conceal a very important truth from you.
Yeah, but the
and
important
this
truth
occurs
is...
whether or not they are trans or otherwise.
Yeah, I agree.
But when I said to you about you have a female, a woman, and she can't give birth, you said she's less of a female, right?
Well, women tend to report feeling like less of a woman.
Sorry, it's still less of a woman. It's still a woman.
Well,
why don't you grant the same to trans? Why don't you say you're less of a woman?
I agree, but again, you would still consider them to be a liar and to have betrayed you if they didn't let you know that...
So put the lie aside.
Right.
Like, just put the lie aside. Just take the proposition which we're working with. You have an adult female, a woman, right? And she can't give birth.
Yeah.
And you say she's less of a woman, but she's still a woman.
Yeah.
Okay. You have an adult
male. She fulfills the social role of being a woman, sure, but she can't fulfill the biological role of being a woman. But
she's still a woman.
In a social sense, yes.
Okay, so she's a woman.
Yes, but saying trans women are women is not that distinction being made. That is, in fact, the erasure of that distinction. And the activists always argue that there should be no distinction made. But I don't think that's true.
If they said trans women are female, I'd agree with you.
Yeah, that's not what they're saying.
But that's not what they're saying. They're saying trans women are women. Trans women are males that fulfill this role.
But the definition of woman that most people use is just adult human female. So they are in effect saying trans women are female.
Well, this is
why it's linguistic trickery that we've got to resist.
No, you said when we were talking about the left and right, let's not commit an etymology fallacy. Let's not focus on the old definitions. This is the very argument they're saying.
But what definition of woman are you using?
You said it's a gender associated version where it's like the roles that are played out through society. So, for example, if you had complete androgen sensitivity syndrome in the womb and throughout your entire life, you wouldn't have been able to process your testosterone. It's a bit more complex than that, but that's essentially what it is, right? And as an adult, you'd be lucky to live in this society to know that you're actually a male, because you would have a functioning vagina, you would have breast tissue, you would have less height than you do now, you wouldn't be as broad, you would be mistaken by everyone as a female. And more importantly, you would be, especially throughout history, you would be filling the woman role.
Yes.
And you would have been incapable of giving birth, like 1,000 other queens, you know. But you still would have been a woman. It's like it didn't go. My queen don't give birth anymore, so you know.
But I really think that there's a distinction here that you're not engaging with, because
I listen.
I really do think that it's not legitimate to take away the biological imperative from the gender roles. I don't think they're just floating above human biology as random constructs that we've just pulled out of the air for the sake of pulling them out of the air. You know,
so to be clear, I accept that.
Right, and so, but if they are connected to the human biology that's underneath them, then we have to take those imperatives into account when dealing with what is a thing. And like I said, they're complicated things with many different attachments, but I think the trunk of the tree is biological reproduction. And so I'm not saying that, you know, if this is man, this is woman, that a man can't fulfill the leaves of the tree, but they aren't the thing underneath. So they are not female.
I agree with you.
We agree. Yeah, I know. But the common understanding of what a woman is, and you haven't given me a different definition yet, is an adult human female.
Well, this is their argument. This is the trans argument.
Yeah.
It's to push that the male, female, basically man and woman being not just synonymous, but literally the exact same as male and female is not sufficient. And the science is showing this, right? And then what we have is this situation where you can keep the baby in the bathwater. We can keep it. You just say female, male, which is what the scientific community does when it comes to these topics at the present. They change their terms, you know. It's about man and woman, which are more about the roles that are filled. We already know that biological men have and will continue to fill these roles, for example, which are women.
Yeah.
And most of history, before we was able to test for DNA and whatnot, they went their whole lives thinking that they're female, which they're not, but they certainly fulfilled the woman role.
I'm not disagreeing with these outliers at all, but we are dealing with the real world, and we are also dealing with a linguistic sleight of hand. It is just not accurate to say that trans women are women, because woman is a biological adult female. That's what adult human female. That's what our definition.
So you are essentially saying trans women are not female.
Yes.
Okay, that's not the argument that's being
But
presented across.
what does woman mean to you then?
They're saying it's the roles that are fulfilled as you originally started with.
But okay, so
your original definition that you were working with.
If we have to expand it out, then it's not fair to just simply say trans women are women, because you are not. You know, if it was women with an asterisk, that would be fine, because then underneath you could put all this. But that's not the rallying cry. The rallying cry is, look, whatever the definition of woman is now, with they're not taking any time to redefine it. Adult human female. Well, trans women are not that.
And also, that's a colloquial definition and not necessarily
a
a
common
biological
English definition.
I know, but like when we're talking about, say, certain sciences and whatnot, we do actually have to interact with specific definitions. Like the definition of mammal is very vague.
But then we can't.
If you look it up with the scientific
I agree,
situation.
but then we can't simply use as a slogan trans women are women, because you are not expanding on all of this. So you are relying on the colloquial definitions of these things.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're being dishonest.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, a lot of ideology is about redefining common words.
Yes.
And
so
that's
are
a
you
real
okay
problem.
with redefining women?
I'm happy. Well, the thing is, yeah, sure. I mean, it depends what it is. I actually don't.
I get what you,
I
get
actually
your
don't
position
see
on
the
what you're saying.
necessity to redefine woman. I think that trans woman is enough of a definition for the thing you're trying to describe, but trans woman is a necessarily different concept to woman.
I would say that when it comes, I guess we just fundamentally disagree with what the definition of woman is and where it's going in that situation. The fact that you said that you're open to changing the definition because you get to keep female, then it's you know by necessary we mean you get this argument from trans people who feel like they're not being accepted for who they are, and like this is the kind of thing that very much contributes to that because it's people being adverse to changing things, which really doesn't affect us. Female would, I get it, but not women.
Well, it might affect people, but it affects people in other ways, because then the question is, well, what's the barrier to entry? And it turns out the barrier to entry is incredibly low. I mean, they want to get to the point where it's just, I say I am a woman, so I could be a woman. You know, this is why Zuby's famous for being the woman's world lifting champion. You know, it's.
Well, I mean, he didn't actually go to a competition or anything like that. But yeah.
But the point is, he identified as a woman very temporarily, and you do get problems with predatory men who are thinking, well, this is just a way that I can get put into a woman's prison, for example, and rapes occur. And I'm sure female prisoners deserve punishment, but I don't want to see them getting raped.
No, I get it.
So it's not. I'm not unsympathetic to the problem that trans people have when it comes to social acceptance, but the method by which the activists are attempting to do this is, frankly, it's too aggressive. If anything else, it is deliberately deforming the language we use, and then essentially forcing people to tell an untruth.
I do agree that a lot of the campaigners go way too far.
Yeah.
Okay, like they call me transphobic simply because
Of course
I don't
they do.
like. I get it, and it's too far. They're hurting their own cause, but. The real situation we have in our hands is we have really high suicide rates with trans people. We have a world that largely doesn't accept them.
Yep.
And so the way in which you fix these things is you do need to be quite quick and hard on these topics to try and push them forward, to try and actually make progress, because no one gives a shit about you because they're not in that same kind of situation.
Yeah.
If you take homosexuality, Sweden released a report a couple of months ago Since legalizing it, the suicide rate in homosexuals went down by 45% or something.
Good.
That's massive.
That's good.
Because all of a sudden they managed to push it through with a lot of struggling and a lot of, riff-raff. They finally got it through, and the result is genuinely, objectively good for those individuals.
I agree.
We need to.
Well,
I personally don't think they're asking much.
No, but before we go on though, the problem is in the nature of what's being asked, because to legalize homosexuality doesn't require us to redefine any terms. It doesn't.
Marriage.
Well, I suppose. Okay, fine. But marriage, and there are campaigners against that, obviously, who believe marriage is between man and a woman. I'm not particularly invested in that argument. I don't care about the sanctity of marriage. Two people of any adult gender can get married, as far as I'm concerned. It really makes no odds to me. But it doesn't require us to have to believe something that the evidence of our own eyes will refute.
Well, some would say it does, because the evidence of their own eyes is the Bible, and the Bible says clearly.
That's fine. Those people can be
but basically, what
people
happens,
I disagree with.
Yeah, but these people that you disagree with, they because the Bible can count as evidence. It's crap evidence, but it's evidence, right?
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
It's
a worldview, I suppose.
Yeah, and they see it as an evidence. They have an opinion based on that evidence, and you are asking them a really big ask. Like if you read the Bible and you take it seriously, Leviticus tells you pretty straight.
Completely. I've read it.
Well, the same is kind of happening with us today. We're being asked to change a definition on a word. One, we have a word that means exactly the same, so there's really no skin off our back. Two, it doesn't affect us. And three, it really does get to the crux of things. Because I agree with you. The main thing, let's say, with a woman is reproduction. But there are so many other factors that build into that role that those constitute what really matters there. It's not a lot of hassle.
I'm not against that at all.
Okay.
I'm not against being polite about these things, especially.
It's not about being polite. It's just.
Well, no, I think it is about being polite, because really, under it, if biological reality is connected to the gender role of woman, which I think we agree on, then what you are saying is for a biological male to occupy that role, that is fundamentally against what we conceive of a woman being.
No, right? I'm saying it's connected. I agree with the connection part. It's not necessary.
I think it is necessary, and I think that it will always be viewed broadly as a form of, I don't want to say imposter, but I can't think of a better word. But I don't.
Because you could use that argument against homosexuals.
You could.
Yeah. But we know scientifically they're wrong.
I'm not saying that we don't, but people aren't necessarily very scientific in the judgments that they make.
So the fact that they're not scientific and that they don't want to make these judgments because they may not be privy to certain science. It's not like they're bad people.
People just aren't beings of pure reason.
But don't you think it's correct to move into the direction of where the science is showing us, rather than maintaining the traditional view, which is hurting people? I
think that there are other alternatives that are not about doing what you want. I mean, for example, why does a man who feels he's a woman trapped in a man's body take female hormones? So
you've different definitions of trans, of course. Some of them have dysphoria, some of them don't.
Sure.
But your question, to accurately understand, you're saying why do they take it?
Yeah.
So it's because they don't identify with the body that nature has given them.
Sure, but they accept that there is a biological connection between the way that their physique is and being female and a woman.
So what?
Otherwise, they wouldn't bother taking the hormones, right?
Sorry, I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
If you're a male, I'm not exactly sure what the exact term is, but you've got gender dysphoria or whatever it is. You feel like you're a woman trapped in a man's body, and you've always felt this way, and if some blood samples were taken and say, you've got higher than usual estrogen. So if we give you estrogen tablets, you'll start forming, your body will start changing, so you'll actually more represent a woman, and so you might feel better about that. The chemical levels in our blood do also affect the way we think. I mean, we know this,
Yeah.
Why would we choose the option that leads to the road of life-altering surgery?
I think what we need to do is, because I guess what you're implying here is that the right option may be not to push through with that. It may actually just be a dysphoria, and you can work past it, kind of thing.
It might. Well, why is the option never raised to give them testosterone rather than estrogen?
But it is.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an expert. But we never hear about this in the public conversation. Though.
Because the sources that get the clicks are the people that push the things, such as a trans woman touching someone in a gym or something.
Yeah, you know? I'm not talking about that.
I know, but like this is why these things happen. Normally, what happens? Say the little kid, is it James or something? Luna, James. I'll call her Luna, okay? Because I'm more comfortable with that from what I've seen of what I've seen. This child went through a lot of people looking at her case and identifying with psychology, where she actually stands, trying to figure out what influence the parents have. Father is a fundamental Christian.
Yeah.
Won't store in his house any female clothing whatsoever. The mother, from the readings of the script, it's showing that she has both male and female. She doesn't really push one or the other, but the media's completely pushed her out as this demon that's trying to push her ideology onto this kid.
Right, okay.
These are all peripheral things, considering our conversation. These things aren't done lightly, and I don't think they should be. Like, these things should be taken very seriously. You go through, you see if there's an issue, and it may be that the case is, you know what, we don't know. Like, these are hard questions. I agree with you, but we can't even have these hard questions, these hard conversations, if people won't admit that there is a conversation to be had. And the way you admit that is you admit that trans women are on that spectrum. If you don't
I agree.
We don't get the conversation.
I agree that there is a conversation to be had, but I don't agree with the formulation of trans women and women, because it's too loaded. It's far too loaded. I think it's actually a kind of philosophical attack, a way of constructing a framing through which you are necessarily compelled to reach their conclusion. And I don't agree that that's appropriate. In the very, very first reading of it, that anyone should be allowed to kind of force that framing on anyone else. Sorry, Callum, we've got to wrap it up. Okay.
I do have a last question.
But hang on, there's one. The thing is, and I agree with you, these are very difficult conversations, and they need to be treated with the utmost care. And I have trans friends myself, so I'm not unsympathetic to this at all. But what I am concerned about is that this is actually not being treated with the care that I think it deserves, because of people pushing an ideology that is fundamentally predicated on the idea that trans women are women. I mean, for example, the NHS's single transgender clinic, a third of the children referred to are autistic. You know, there are hundreds of people now who are detransitioning, saying, well, actually, I was just an effeminate gay man. I'm actually not. And then you end up reading the horror stories.
You do get...
Well, no, there are a lot of them. Have you ever read any of the sort of like transgender regret blogs? People writing anonymously.
I have seen some.
Awful. I am not
surprised.
surprised.
You know, I have seen these things, and I get it.
But but seriously, I am not surprised that the trans suicide rate is so high. So many times I have read these descriptions of people, and they're saying, "Look, I have ruined my life. I'm young. I now am totally infertile. I'm missing my genitalia. I don't know where I fit in society, and I want to kill myself. And yet, the institutions will shove people in this direction."
But
and it's
for every case that you have like that, you have people saying, I am really happy to finally be recognised as a person. I mean, society doesn't recognise me as who I am, but you know, like I feel more comfortable in my body, and it saves people's lives as well. It's wrong to go for any outlier. I'm not saying I don't recognise.
I don't think these are necessarily the outliers, though. I think it's, you know, we don't have the numbers in yet because it's all very new. But there are lots of people who seem to be on this case and on this side. I mean, you know, out of something like 3,000 people or whatever, you know, if 400 people are saying, actually, I felt like I was rushed through this, and now I'm trapped in an irreversible position, I just want to kill myself. I really think that we have to be more careful about all of this, because I mean, it is ruining lives. It is actually ruining lives. That the activists are in control of the process. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be a process.
No, they're not in control of that process of going through the psychological...
They are. There are activist doctors, there are activist nurses. And this is the problem. There are people who fully buy in to the idea that trans women are women, but I don't even think we can agree on that as it's formulated. I'm not saying there's not a problem. I'm not saying these people don't deserve help. And I'm not saying we should be rude to them or anything like that. I'm saying that the people who are driving the agenda are dangerous and are actually hurting people, and I can show you the people that they've hurt.
So do we have 5 minutes, Callum?
We can do 5 minutes, sure.